Hey, Slick Talkers, thank you so much for tuning into this podcast. And I know that if you love this show, you'll also love my morning show called Good Morning Hospitality with my co hosts Michael Golden and Brandy Canali, as we spend 30 minutes every Monday morning to dive into the industry's top latest news and trending topics. So go check it out on wherever you find your podcasts at Good Morning Hospitality. And you can live stream with us on Monday mornings on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, YouTube. Now, I hope you enjoy this episode.
Yeah, I think tech's actually really important, not because rental operators are in the technology business, but they're in the service business. And I think right now, as you look at growing resident demands, growing owner demands, tech is a critical way for vacation rental managers to augment what they do so they can focus their most valuable resource, their time, on the things that differentiate their properties, delight guests, and not do the mundane things.
Welcome to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast where we discuss all things hospitality, hotels, and business. You can find us online at slicktalkthepodcast.com and on every podcast listening platform.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Slick Talk, the hospitality podcast. I'm your host, Will Slickers, and today I have the opportunity to interview and talk with Sean Miller, who is the president of PointCentral. And if you're in the vacation rental space, I'm sure you've heard of him. So I'm really excited. Sean, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hi, Will. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. It's been an exciting couple months through a kind of a pandemic, but getting to meet all sorts of new people, such as yourself. So I'm really excited to have this opportunity to interview you and talk about, all things short-term rental on the podcast.
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's jump into it.
Awesome. So let's just jump right into your background. Where does your story really begin and start?
So on a personal side, my story starts, I'm originally born and raised in Chicago. I've lived now in the Los Angeles area for over 25 years, but I've also been fortunate to live abroad a few times. I've lived in Argentina, Italy, and China. I studied economics at a school called Occidental College and later got my MBA from the University of North Carolina. And when it comes to my professional life, how I applied some of that learning was when I started out through a lot of my earlier career was moving a bunch of different functions and industries. So I worked in finance and sales, project management, product management, and marketing across industries like automobile, power generation, consumer electronics, professional tools, and investment banking. So I really pushed myself to see a lot of different angles.
Yeah, you did. So where did all those journeys and experiences, where did that lead into PointCentral? How did you were you the unconventional way of falling into it? Were you a host or something yourself and then started to realize some pain points, or what was your story really to that?
So I had personally owned a rental property. My folks had owned a short-term rental. So had dabbled in it, but I wasn't doing it full time or that much of my time. For me, I came in from the technology aspect. So I've always sort of been a tech enthusiast or a geek, depending on, I take geek as a term of endearment, but in my family, but not just a tech enthusiast, but one who really liked to understand how can I use this to help solve my family's problems? So simplest way was I was a kid who always had to hook up the stereo system or the VCR. But as I got older, I had a job Generac, where I first got to apply that passion to what I was doing. So Generac makes generators, and I led the development of what was called MobileLink. So this device that connected all our generators to the internet allowed us to see if they're running, if they had issues, if there's a predictive issue we need to be worried about. And really, my first time getting to merge that passion and then a professional opportunity. After that, went to WeMo, which was Belkin's home automation business unit, and spent a couple of years there. That was sort of earlier days of adoption of IoT and smart home. So really got to refine that, listen to what customers want, and build the products that drive their success and your success. And then joined PointCentral 4 years ago. I'd actually met the CEO of our parent company, Alarm.com, when I was at Generac. We'd stayed in contact, so joined 4 years ago, and I've had a lot of fun since. But yeah, so tech is what led me into this. But I really enjoyed the application of technology to property management, because rental property has been around for a long time. And we're sort of a very interesting time where I think technology can help property managers.
Oh, totally. So you really got to experience everything from the ground up when you kind of were doing like your data research, going in from, was it WeMo and then to PointCentral?
Yeah. So I was with Wemo and then joined PointCentral. So again,
Okay.
had really a smart home, consumer technology, but
Yeah.
had never worked formally in real estate.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. So let me ask you from your property standpoint, for your short-term rentals, what were some things that you were learning along the way in the beginning? I know this is totally not what we discussed on the episode, but I'm just kind of curious, what tech things did you early on start applying to your property?
Yeah, so I've had two personal experiences um, that have really sort of driven home some of the things we do at PointCentral. One of which is one was before I joined PointCentral. Actually, I rented condos and homes up in the mountains here, and I always hated when I would show up in the winter and the owner would turn the thermostat off to save money, but it would be 50 degrees in the house, and it would take forever to heat up, and then you'd overheat it. So you're putting clothes on, then you're trying to take clothes off, and it was just never a good experience to me. So in my younger days, I that was one that I've kept in mind. And then actually, when I got a little bit older and was married, I actually checked into a rental once. People went to go put their stuff upstairs. We all headed downstairs. There's a 3-level and there's a spa. And actually, when we got to the bottom level, there was someone down there. It was one of the maintenance person's sons. They were from a personal side, they're battling some addiction, so they're having a tough time in life, but they had gotten access to keys from their relation and were staying at these properties when they thought they weren't booked. Well, luckily no one got hurt and everyone left, but it scared everyone. And that's one of the things where, today when I meet property managers and tell them about like, why do we like the function of a keyless lock, like the audit history and controlling who's in, like that's a personal story to me that I always keep in the back of my mind of, why do I want to do this? Like, what's it mean?
No, exactly. That's like kind of like the nightmare stories that people are scared of, right? They're like, oh, I want to make some side income, and all of a sudden they meet other people in the industry that have been doing it, and they're like, are there any horror stories? Do people rob you or take your stuff? And it's like, no, but sometimes you walk in on a guest or you have this, like, you never know, like all this stuff, especially it's like a learning curve, I think. So that's pretty, that's intense. I would be a little freaked out in the beginning walking down to somebody in the spa, but oh yeah. Anyways, we're gonna get that image out of our head. So I want to kind of explain for the audience. For those who don't know what PointCentral is and what you guys do, what do you guys do? What's the whole point and purpose and mission behind PointCentral?
Yeah, so a lot of people would look at what we do and call it a smart home. We like to use the term smart properties because what we think we're doing is we're focused on helping turn rental properties, whether those are single family homes or multifamily buildings like condos and apartments, but turning those properties into smart properties that are safer, more enjoyable for guests, but also more profitable for property managers and owners. And so why we use the term smart properties, again, we're trying to bring together hardware and services to sort of power this transformation that is easy to use, secure, flexible, and intuitive.
No, that's awesome. So more like you guys have thermostats and automated locks and all this type of stuff that I think a lot of people don't realize can really help them become remote managers for other than cleaning and maintenance issues. But this can really help them kind of have eyes and ears on the property. What other solutions integrate really with property managers like this? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah. So it's interesting when I talk to someone today, I think they will sort of fall into one of two buckets. They'll be the person who goes, oh yeah, smart home, keyless locks. I have a keyless lock. And so like I would say, yes, that's part of it. That's a very entry level way to think about it, or a very first step. But then there's people who will have smart locks and cameras and thermostats and voice devices and all types of stuff, which there's sort of a balance. Like your guests may love all those things, and that's great. But there's also like challenges around, well, with cameras, right? How are you respecting privacy and things like that? Are all these devices installed by the property manager or the owner? One of the things property managers have really started to get up to speed with is they may not fully understand all the value they'll get from some of these today, but one of the things that will really throw them a wrench is if the owner starts throwing in connected thermostats on their own and starts changing the temperature while a guest is in there, that property manager is going to have a lot of phone calls flowing in. So where we usually look at people or sort of coach people to start is easiest way to start is think of a lock and a thermostat. That's going to control comfort. It's going to save energy. You're going to make sure we can watch for things like mold growth, make sure it doesn't get too moist. We can watch for, make sure it doesn't get too cold, for burst pipes, get people in and out, et cetera. And then look at ways to step into, again, how do you provide that owner more value? So things like water leak detectors, simple things like that. Even one property manager got really creative. They put a temperature sensor in the refrigerator. And that was their way when guests would show up, they'd have guests sometimes call and go, your refrigerator doesn't work. I just loaded it up with all these warm groceries. And now the property manager could look at their dashboard and go, well, that refrigerator has been maintaining temp perfectly fine for the last week. You just load it up, give it a couple hours to cool down. So
that makes sense.
People start and then step into it.
Yeah, no, it's definitely, I think it also really depends on like the guest and the type of experience that you're putting behind like your brand. Like if you have a brand that's more focused on outdoors and all this other stuff, you're probably not going to have like your properties are going to probably be a little bit more remote than most. You're not going to have the Wi-Fi capabilities to do a lot of this stuff or whatever that may be. So I think, yeah, it also goes off of your style of property management. But this is definitely like a great solution for anyone who's got that whole home rental, multifamily unit, urban, and maybe even people like my parents. I always use them for example. Those poor people, they're probably heard their names get mentioned on the podcast too many times. But they have that ability to have some kind of smart automation, but not have to fully, go full like Elon Musk tech flying house type style, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One key thing I think we always tell property managers, like what we want to do is augment things, not replace them, right? So you don't want just having to show up and having to download an app and figure out how to use it. You want them still to be able to enjoy their vacation, but using a code instead of a key, that means they get to check in early.
Yeah.
Not worry about losing it. It's easy for them, right? But
exactly.
You just got to know your guests, know your own stuff, and figure out how do you augment things. That's a key.
No, for sure. I love that. And you and I discussed like 3 important, maybe even 4, topics regarding, guest experience, operations, asset management, and of course, preventative maintenance. So why do you think these 4 are super important, and how do they kind of tie together at the end of the day?
Yeah. So sort of the waypoints are whenever we're looking at either building a new product ourselves, whether it be hardware or software, or looking at a potential third-party piece of hardware to integrate with, we ask ourselves, like, we think we generate value in 3 buckets: guest amenities, operational efficiencies, and asset protection. And so we'll look at, like, is this creating value for at least the property manager, hopefully the property manager, the owner, and the guest in one of those buckets. And where those come together, outside there's obviously things you can do with them, but where I think they're coming together is looking around today. I think there's a bigger shift of VRMs starting to think of themselves as not just a property manager, which is trying to get ahead in a bed, but as an asset manager, right? So whether it's because COVID drove your market to maybe have a longer shoulder season or more downtime than you expected, or maybe the owners don't want to rent it out, or whatever it is, but you may be now looking at homes that you're not just booking heads and beds every weekend, but you have to understand, like, well, how do I run my business and what will the owner need from me? If in the past I haven't thought about it that way. And so that's now driving these property managers to look at us and say, operational efficiency, they've generally understood, but it's, been lost keys and thermostat control. Amenities, direct to home check-in, not in a cold home, they get it. But now that asset protection part, when you think of yourself as an asset manager and going, how do I protect this home to maximize the cash flows out, minimize those that in, and the overall appreciation. I mean, smart homes, it's been out now for years, but there's research that show it adds value to the value of a home. It adds the value of a home when you go to sell it. So it's really an investment that the owner wants to make, that the property manager utilizes to have a business that's an asset management focused, not just property management focused.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you, because you guys probably have a ton of data, probably have a ton of testimonies from either people that are using PointCentral devices and all the tools that you guys have. What are ways that people are kind of using this to become asset managers? Is it really just to have eyes and ears on the property when it's not, like you said, kind of more downtime, where maybe if it's a beach property, they're not getting as well. Beach properties are kind of a bad example for my opinion because they're actually doing pretty well. But let's just say this one beach property for some reason is not performing well. But having these tools in place, that helps them then kind of give like reassurance to the owner saying, look, your place is not dropped in temperature. We don't have any sensors going off for the pipes. Everything seems to be operating fine. That if we do get a check-in or a guest or a booking, that will be ready, and we hopefully won't run into any issues. They won't walk in and the floor will be 3 feet underwater type deal.
Yeah. So exactly right. Well, I mean, easiest way is, our parent company is alarm.com. So alarm's known for home security. So one of the things we've started to see increased interest in is owners asking the property manager, hey, I want a security system on the home. I want something to watch this when no one's there. A traditional security system, while it protects against that, again, it's sort of a friction point because now the owner has to give the property manager code. The property manager has to remember to give it to the guest. And so what we'll do is, because we're utilizing the same hardware, we can sort of enable those monitored life safety services and automatically synchronize them. So it de-arms when the guest checks in, it rearms at checkout. They're not worried about setting it off while they're there, but you're still protecting that asset between stays. There were some things that happened. If you remember the holidays from 2019 to 2020, there's actually a couple of homes where there wasn't smoke or CO detectors and people had some scares. So now you get that sort of life safety protection. That's one area where we've seen people starting to ask. Another one, water sensors have been out for a while, but people haven't asked about them. So last year alone, I just pulled up some data. We found almost 55,000 water alerts from home. So this could have been occupied or unoccupied, but we had noticed, a sink, a toilet, a water heater, something would start to drip, and we could catch that before, especially if the water heater's in the garage, before a guest shows up and now that it's an indoor swimming pool.
Yeah.
That's a great thing. I'm sure the owner and the property manager want to know.
So these
and then along that, we also have this HVAC analytics service where it looks predictively for troubled HVAC systems. We found 360,000 of those last year. So again, now you didn't have a guest show up, in the middle of winter and say, turn the heat on and it doesn't work, or summer and it doesn't work, which then if you're the owner, you're paying time and a half to someone to go fix it. If you're the property manager, you're more likely going to get a really bad review from that guest, or you're going to be given a lot of concessions to make them happy. And the guest is just overall not starting their vacation well, so their chance of returning probably isn't that high. So you can eliminate all those things by just having the same, again, this all like that thermostat's coming from the same thermostat on the wall. So it's one piece of hardware, one service you're paying for, but you just generate more value from it.
Yeah, I was going to say that's pretty incredible. So those sensors actually just pick up like even a small drip. It's like very preventative maintenance type sensor.
Exactly. You can think of like a water heater. Typically when it starts to fail, it'll get very small cracks. And what this water sensor has is just a really thin rope, like dental floss that you put around it. And so it'll sense one of those first drips and let you know, which is typically weeks before it actually ruptures. But you can schedule it when no one's in.
Yeah.
You can buy it at the right price. You can do everything in a much more, predictive way.
Yeah.
Scheduled way.
Yeah. So you're really like, I love this. You're stopping the issue. It's like, my favorite hospitality saying is, is to exceed their expectations. So anticipate their needs. This is one way for managers, especially hospitality focused managers. This isn't just like, this also ties into asset management, but really goes into anticipating your owner's needs and your guest needs. And that means their needs is that they don't want to walk into a 3-foot swimming pool, and the owners want to pay, crazy amount of number for a repair, especially when they're supposed to be making money off of this booking instead of, paying for, somebody to really stay at their property after all the repairs are done and being fixed.
And Will, you remember from your hotel days, right? There was also usually those thermostats had certain limits.
Yeah.
So you couldn't overwork the system.
Yeah.
We've mirrored a lot of those things. So someone can't, try and make it 50 degrees in the summer in Phoenix, or turn on the AC and open the slider and just try to cool the world, right? Like all those things not only waste energy, but put more wear and tear on the asset, which the owner, at the end of the day, you want to provide a good experience, but you also want to have boundaries so it doesn't get overused.
Yeah. Because there's a big difference from my house when I set it at a certain degree. Let's say I set it at 68 degrees on a daily level. It's pretty well maintained, other than when myself or a family walks in. But when you have a property that's constantly having people in and out, and then not in for a week, but then in for another 2 weeks, and it's just that actually adds up a lot more than someone who's consistently living there and not really fidgeting with different temperatures and opening and closing the slider and the refrigerator and the dishwasher and the washer and dryer, like all that stuff at the same time. So that's pretty interesting to think about if you add up the amount of more uses it gets from a vacation rental than it would probably from your actual living home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was really interesting. So I guess for managers that are out there right now listening to this, what are some ways that you guys with Point Central, or even just the overall, I think we've had this crazy, it's, yeah, just to think about it, it's almost been a year since we had our first like lockdown type stuff happen. What are some stuff that people are really doing to implement these new systems? Are they, how are they connecting with their PMS? How are they, communicating this stuff with the guests? Is this becoming something that they're using for marketing? I think to get new properties. Like, what do you guys see for Point Central as this as a value add?
Yeah. So I wish more people put it as a marketing bullet, but not there yet as an industry. But what, again, sort of that bigger theme of property managers going through COVID probably had to reinvent themselves some. And even if they're not fully in, I need to become an asset manager today, they've had to do things differently, either to augment for staff couldn't be there or increase demand or whatever. And so what we are seeing is people are looking to, a term I've heard used across is like they're looking at their tech stack, right? And say, what am I doing? So you have your PMS. Your PMS is going to do certain core things, but the reality is no one piece of software ever does everything. And so I think there's a couple of interesting categories that people start to look at. Property automation is one, right? To drive that efficiency, augment my staff, let me have the time with guests I need. I think another one's been, revenue management, sort of forecasting, right? Again, your gut. A lot of people are able to do it based on their knowledge of a market for years past, but now that's been upturned. And if you can start to see some inputs, again, you're still going to make the decision, but inputs on flights coming into an area or other hotel demand or concerts or things like that, that would start to inform you, like maybe a marketing strategy or a rate strategy. I think that's very powerful. And then I think just operations consistency. Like Breezeway is a good example. It's this company that has this work order cleaning process management that I think has been really important. Again, early days of COVID, everyone wanted to know the house is being cleaned right. But what they're finding is there's just a lot of variability that can go into this. And like Breezeway and us, we have an integration where we know when the guest checks out with the code, we can automatically ping the cleaner and say, hey, they checked out early. You can get in there early. You can schedule your day better. And as soon as it's clean, the inspector can know, and that can lead to an early check-in, which gives the guest a better experience, right? So there's this way to sort of pull it all together that I think people are starting to look at things like that. Today, I think those are their questions people are, the tech tools people are looking for. And I think it's also sort of getting a little bit, the thing I think that's interesting to get to is where people are starting to understand more of that CRM functionality. So how do I know more about my guests? Yeah, we know we wanted to market to them in the past so they become repeat customers, but how do I know more about what they want to do, what they like to eat, what temperature do they want when they arrive, and all these things. So again, I can utilize all my tech stack, whether it be cleaning or smart, to deliver an experience that feels very custom to them, but was very scalable and repeatable for me as a property manager.
Yeah, it's like an ebb and flow. It's like, it feels like a dance almost, the way that it syncs and synergizes with all the back end software that we have. I'm so glad that you mentioned Breezeway, because Jeremiah Gall, from the founder of Breezeway, I love the fact that he was talking about quality control. Safety and cleanliness and quality now are kind of like tying in together. They're it's really interesting just to see from like the beginning of COVID to where we are now, where cleanliness and safety were really separate topics and really kind of like different brother and sister type stuff, but now they're really just joined together as one, going into quality control for the owner, for the asset management side, for the property manager, for the guest. So I find that really interesting, and I love that how you communicate. It's just a really good ebb and flow. So it's just So I
like the dance analogy, Will. That's the best one.
Exactly. It's like a dance.
As a 6'6" guy, dancing's not one of my strengths, but I've seen it on TV done well.
Yeah, Dancing with the Stars. Good spectating moment right there, but definitely not a participant. I feel that. Sometimes I wish after a few drinks I wouldn't dance or stuff like that, but that's just me. But no, Sean, so that's really cool. I'm for all the listeners right now, I'm just kind of curious, what do you guys have? What are you guys really excited about? I love asking this question to any of the guests on the show. What gets you guys excited at Point Central, as we're continuing to move forward to a little bit more recovery?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, we're excited generally just for the recovery. I think we've seen in a lot of markets demand pick back up or even maybe outperform. I'm excited for some of the markets that weren't drive-to destinations, like for some of our partners in Hawaii, where people start getting on planes and flying out. That'll be great. I think overall, this not being able to see family and friends as much over the last 12 months, I think will actually really be a tailwind for the industry, because I think people are going to want to get out and see one another and spend time with one another, and probably do so again in the way that makes a vacation rental different from a hotel, being that you get more space, right? You can get together a larger family and cook and hang out and be at the beach that, it's just very difficult to do with other lodging products out there.
Definitely.
So I'm really excited about that in general. And we're excited about a few things, specifically that's related to us. This is probably a weird thing about us, but as people start to use this more, we constantly start thinking about well, how do we make sure we do this the right way? So you can think about the reliability of the system, or the biggest topic lately has been data privacy, as people are using these tools more. What are you doing with the data? Are you selling it to someone?
Yeah.
How to make sure the guest data doesn't go? There's sometimes a request to do something, and when you think through it, it's not as easy to get to the endpoint if you're thinking about that. And then we've had some products launch, we launched a connected intercom product. So you can think about gated single family communities or condos and apartments, where now the same code we send someone for their door can actually look at the intercom too. So you get this seamless check-in, check-out experience where no one has to go check out a key and a fob. It just all works for them when they show up when it should work.
Again, smooth, ebb and flow, a dance. I love it. I think that's super great. Well, no, that gets me excited. I'm excited to see more, as we see the industry professionalize and continue to evolve. It's really cool to see the things that people are starting to implement and pick and play. I think that's what gets me excited about the most for property managers, that they really get to customize how they're operating. And, each property is different. So, of course, they're plugging and playing different new things. So this is just another one of them that gets me excited as well. So, Sean, thank you so much for being on the show, my friend. It's great to have met you. And I'm excited to see what you guys continue to do in the industry.
Thanks, Will. A pleasure to be here, and look forward to staying in contact.
Of course. My pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening. We love your support and want to provide the best we can to all our listeners. So please find us online, social media, and on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and Google Podcast.
What's up, everybody? If you've gotten this far into the episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast, then you are amazing, and thank you so much for tuning in. We want to send you two places really quickly. If you can, check out the show notes and click the hospitality.fm link. Check out all of our other shows on the podcast network. And don't forget, if you have someone that you want to hear on the podcast, then fill out the guest fill out form so that way we can get them on the show. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I hope you enjoy another episode of Slick Talk, the Hospitality Podcast.